Okay, welcome everyone to today's event on behalf of SciTrain. My name is Scott, and I'm joined by some special guests today from Jenny, and we're going to introduce everyone here in just a minute. So feel free to get settled into the room, and we want to welcome everyone to the event today. It's a really exciting one for us, and we're delighted to be here in conjunction with Jenny. As always, my partner in crime is the illustrious Professor Gareth Dyke. Gareth, how are you doing today?
Perfect. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks, Scott. Everything is going well, and I hope you're also in good shape and everything is happening fantastically. Welcome everybody to our event. Do let us know where you're from in the chat box. Do let us know where you're joining us from, Scott.
Great, yeah. And we're joined by special guests from Jenny today. I'd like to introduce them briefly. Justin Wong is head of growth at Jenni.ai. Justin, hello, welcome.
Thanks for having us, guys.
It's a pleasure. And we're also joined by Shane Hong. Shane is growth manager at Jenny. Hi, Shane. Welcome, and thanks for joining today.
Hi, Scott. Hi, everyone. My name's Shane. Happy to be here.
Great. We're going to kick off here in just a moment here. So again, we really appreciate everyone taking time out of your busy research calendar to join us for this event. So the goal of our event today is to go through some tips and tricks to help you write and structure an effective manuscript. And Professor Dyke is going to go through some of his top tips on getting started on that manuscript. And we're going to take some peeks at the Jenny tool and look at some ways that you can use the tool to shape your manuscript to get started. We'll look at some basic functions that you can use to write more quickly and efficiently. And we'll do some screen shares just to show you what we're looking at so you can see how you can get started on writing your next paper using Jenny. So I think we're almost ready to kick off here. Everybody ready to go?
Definitely. Let's do it. And it's great to see so many people. I just altered the chat settings so people can chat and put their information in and everyone can see it. There's Australia, India, Nigeria, Pakistan. We've got a number of different places. Bulgaria, fantastic. Yeah, great to see so many people from all different places joining us today.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Well, let's turn it over to Professor Dyke, and I'll be popping back in a few minutes just to do some on-screen demos using Jenny. So yeah, again, welcome, Justin, Shane, and all of our guests today, and over to you, Professor Dyke.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. This is the fantastic opportunity that we have to present a webinar in conjunction with our friends at Jenni.ai. My name's Gareth Dyke. We're going to be talking a little bit about research writing. We're going to give you some insider tips from our experience, my experience working as a researcher and working as a journal editor. And we're going to begin by talking a little bit about preparation and writing strategy. We're going to look at putting a research paper, a research article together. And as Scott mentioned, he's going to jump back in a moment and show you how you can use the fantastic Jenni.ai tool to speed up your research writing. We were doing a bit of a practice session earlier this morning, Scott and I, looking at how Jenni.ai really speeds up the whole process. Used to take me weeks to put together a research article. Now, as you'll see in this event, we're going to do it in less than an hour. It's absolutely fantastic. Let's begin. Let's talk a little bit about preparing to write your next paper, because of course, you've got to make sure that when you write a research article, publish it, we hope, fingers crossed, it stands out from all the others. In 2022, a few years ago, more than 2 million research articles were published around the world in different academic journals, 30,000 per month just in the medical and health sciences. So your first step, often as a researcher, is finding a journal, deciding on which journal you're going to use for your next research article. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment, but you want your paper to stand out from all of the others. We also think at the beginning of events like this about why it is you want to see your paper published. Is it to get funding? Is it to get promoted? Perhaps it's to develop research, a very honorable aim, a very honorable reason to get your paper published. Or perhaps more practically speaking, you might need to get your master's or your PhD, and one of your university's requirements for doing that is going to be the publication of a research article, probably in an SCI or ESCI Scopus Q1 or Q2 journal. Keep that in mind because, as we'll also talk about in this event today, your reasons for getting your paper published quite different from the motivations of editors and peer reviewers. Those people, a bit like me, on the other side of the desk evaluating research articles when they come into journals at submission. So that's important. Before you start to use the Jenni.ai tool and you start to write, think about how you're going to make sure that your research submission gets through that first stage. We call it editorial triage at the journal, at the desk editorial stage. Editors, people like me, they look at research papers and they think, does this article fit with the scope of the journal? Does it have a clear message? Is it original? Is it true? And most importantly, is it relevant to our readers? You're going to have to sell your research to get it through editorial triage at the start of the process. So do have a good think about your message. What is it that your research article is telling readers, editors, and peer reviewers? Because if you don't have a simple, clear take-home message in your research work, in your research paper, editors will probably reject it before sending it out for peer review. You've got to ask yourself the question, why is this interesting? Why should an editor want to send this paper out for peer review? So what we do, Scott and I, in these kind of events, we ask our audience, we encourage people to think about their take-home message, their story. Why is your work new and interesting? How does it relate to a hot topic? What's new and challenging? Do you provide a solution to a problem? Let's put that into a story. Thinking about this before you begin to write, before you get involved with the Jenni.ai writing tool, having a journal in mind, having a message at the outset from your research, very, very important. Actually, there are 3 things that you should know, that you should have in mind before you begin the writing process. One is your journal, the other, your message, and the third is going to be structure. We'll come on to that in a moment, but targeting a journal, very important. We encourage you to come along to some of our other events on journal selection, but selecting a journal, very important. You aim high, you choose appropriately, and you come along and we can help you to learn to sell and manage your submission into international journals, getting your work published in fantastic leading international journals. Choose your topic, identify your audience, identify the purpose of your research, and gather all of those supporting details before you start to write, because you don't want to get one of these letters. Many thanks for asking if we'd like to publish your paper. It's good and original, but we're not willing to publish it. The good bits were not original, and the original bits were not good. Desk rejection because you haven't selected effectively a target journal at the outset, got a good target journal in mind to make sure that your research stands out and help you with the structure of your writing, preparing to write before we get into the writing itself is critical. And it's something that not a lot of researchers really do effectively. International publishers reject a lot of submissions. And here's a common list of common problems as to why, outside of the scope, plagiarism, incorrect formatting, poor English writing. Well, we're here to solve that problem for you today. Reviewer responses and recycled submissions. But message, journal selection, and thinking about your structure before you get going is critical. English 2, you don't want to confuse. It's important that your academic research message is not buried in language issues. especially for non-native speakers. We live in a time of fantastic access to tools to help us. Jenni.ai is our recommendation. It's a way of making sure that your English is able to pass the bar to get accepted in fantastic international journals. English, of course, is our universal language of scientific academic communication. And what you'll find is that academic papers often need to be well written to a higher standard of English in many cases than you might find in other kinds of writing that you do. And the writing process, of course, very beneficial. We're here to help with that. One of the goals of our training, one of the goals of this event is to hopefully show you that the writing process can be fun. The writing process can be beneficial in its own right. The question, of course, is how. We're going to give you tips. We're going to show you in a moment how you can use the Jenni.ai tool to accelerate your writing, 40 minutes rather than 4 weeks to put together an academic article. Try to think in English. Try to write often and a little bit in English every day. If you translate from your native language into English, do check that translation with a subject area specialist. As you'll know well, in your subject area, lots of specific information can get lost in translation. And one of our top tips for success, journal selection, but picking papers in your target journal, the journal where you would like to publish your research paper that you like, you respect. You see a great paper published that you'd like to emulate. Well, you can look at the style, you can look at the English, you can put the structure, as you'll see in a moment, of that article into Jenni, and you can get your own research up to a very, very high standard, ready for publication. In English, academic writing, short sentences, no unnecessary words, familiar words. Use the active voice, as Scott will show you in a moment. We analyzed, our team analyzed, I collected data, rather than the passive third person voice. A clear style and proper punctuation will help a lot with your readability. And don't forget that it's your readers, those people on the other side of the page, on the other side of the PDF, the screen, the readers, other researchers who are going to cite your work in their own articles. Message. What is the takeaway of your research? Where does the structure of your writing come from? It comes from your journal selection, your audience. Message, audience, and structure of the writing are 3 key elements to have in mind before you begin the writing process. So, be like Arnold is one of our other key messages from this event today. Have a structure. Jenni will give you that. Your target journal, feeding that information into the Jenni tool, will give you that. You then can put your article together. So what we're going to do now, having introduced some elements of academic writing and things to do before you begin, we're going to give you some pro tips for the IMRAD academic article structure, the introduction, methods, results, and discussion, that standard structure for an academic research article. Because of course, as we've talked about already, structure is the most important element of academic article writing. Message, the takeaway, the audience, that's your journal selection. And from that comes the structure of the writing. Very important to have thought this through before you begin to write. Readers need to know where they've come from, where they are now, and where they're going. It's like reading a detective story or watching a movie. You need a plot, a structure for your academic writing. And of course, that comes in many STM articles from the IMRAD structure, the introduction, methods, results, discussion, and conclusions. We've got the title, abstract, and keywords at the top, the IMRAD structure in the middle. This is most likely what you'll be aiming for if your research is in science, technology, medicine, and mathematics, STM disciplines. 2 million papers published in 2022. How are you going to make sure that your research stands out? Well, we're going to give you some insights in this event. Your title, your abstract, for indexing and searching, make sure they stand out. And we'll come back to those in a moment. Then the IMRAD structure as well, building those different sections of your academic article. So let's look and refine our article structure with a quick Jenni demo. Do we have a target journal in mind? Did you select one? Tell Jenni what kind of article we're planning. Look at those word counts and desired sections, and then let's build that IMRAD structure using Jenni.ai. Scott, how are we doing? Everything going well?
Going great. We've got a great audience here tonight. People seem very participative. It's great to see everyone here. We're going to take a look at getting started with a journal article based on Professor Dyke's tips here. So, key questions here. If you could just go back to that slide for a moment, Professor. Journal selection is crucially important because that's going to define some of the prompts that we give Jenni to build our manuscript. So, the idea is having a journal in mind so that you know what their requirements are, what their styled expectations are, and so on. So actually, no worries, Professor. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm going to open up the Jenni tool here. Just give me a moment. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. All good. Okay, so I've got a blank canvas here. If you open Jenni and you start a completely new document, you're going to end up with something that looks pretty much like this. So what I like to do is to start with a prompt. Before we do that, I want to just very quickly show you some of the windows and functions. I confess I'm still a total noob with Jenni, but it's so easy that even I can use it. So on the left-hand side, we've got this pull-out sidebar, which has your documents. Those are the manuscripts that you're working on. You can see I've got a few research projects on the go here. And there's also your library, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But basically, this is where you can upload some of your sources. In my case, I've got several PDFs of some articles that I've downloaded that are relevant to the manuscript I'm writing. And then there are some other functions here which we'll explore at a later time. But another important function to pull out here is the AI chat. So if you've used any other AI tools, then this will be familiar to you. This is where you're going to interact with the interface, ask it questions, give it instructions, give it prompts and things. And a couple of key functions I wanted to highlight here is that you can tell Jenni where you want to point Jenni's insights towards. So you might want to have current documents open and ask it questions about that. You can have it combing the web for more sources to add to your citation list and more readings that you can do. And I've also got it selected here to comb through my library. So as you noticed a moment ago, I have my library and some sources here. So it's great to be able to select what Jenni is combing through. That's one function I wanted to highlight. Another thing I wanted to mention here is in the settings, you'll notice that I've got the autocomplete off just for now. The autocomplete is amazing, and it's a thrill to just give Jenni a prompt and help you AI assist your writing of your sections. But because I'm going to rock this old school today, I'm going to temporarily turn this off because I've already got some portions drafted for my paper. I'm going to put those into Jenni, and I'm going to follow the structure that Professor Dyke just talked about. So full disclosure, this is not a real research paper. So just so you know, I'm going to start with a prompt here in Jenni, and it's on a subject that I'm very interested in, which is sports medicine. Again, I'm not a sports medicine researcher or nutritionist, full disclosure. I'm going to open up my prompt window here in Jenni, and I've given it some instructions here on what kind of paper I'm writing. This is a sports medicine paper. It's a randomized control trial, and it's about the effects of keto diet on runners. So if you're a marathon runner, what's the impact of eating, a ketogenic high-fat diet versus a sort of traditional sports high-carb diet on long-distance runners? And so I've given Jenni my prompt. What I'm going to do here is to follow Professor Dyke's tips. I'm going to ask Jenni to set up some standard headings here. So you can see Jenni's already set here to give me the IMRAD structure that Gareth was talking about. So let's click Start Writing here. I'm going to close this window. So it's given me a placeholder title, which is already a pretty good title, actually. And it's set up a pretty standard set of IMRAD sections. So I've got introduction, lit review, methodology, and so on. So I know because I've already selected my journal, as Gareth suggested, I know that their style guidelines suggest something more like this, where there isn't a separate literature review. It's more like a folded into the rest of the sections. The lit review sort of is folded into the introduction. And then the discussion and conclusion sections are going to be together in one. So it's super easy just to set these up in Jenni. So you can see now I've got a very classic IMRAD structure here with my introduction, method, results, and conclusion. Now, yeah, that's kind of an old school way to use it. I know you could do this in a word processor or something else, but coming up later, we'll show you some tips and tricks to get the most out of Jenni as you start diving into each of these individual sections. Now, I'm going to turn this back over to Gareth in just a moment, but one key point here is when you've got this set up in Jenni or in any writing tool, you might be tempted to start writing at the top because you've got the structure right there. You've got your title, right? You've got your introduction, your methods. So you'd be tempted to, crack your knuckles and start going on the introduction and start writing top down. But actually, that's probably not the most logical way to start writing a manuscript. So I'll turn you back over to Gareth. He's going to explain why you should not start writing from top to bottom. You should start probably with your methods, right, Professor? What do you think?
Oh, let's see. Absolutely. I mean, many people are tempted to do that. And that's really great to see the inside workings of the Jenni.ai tool. And it's just really easy to use. We were talking earlier, Scott, right, about how much time this would normally have taken to put together this kind of structure. That's absolutely, absolutely brilliant. I'm just going to bring back my share. There it is, everybody. So Scott has just talked us through how to set up and structure a new article using Jenni.ai. Give it a go. We'll be bringing in some of our colleagues from the team a little bit later. If you have any specific questions about the tool or how you can get access to the tool. But there's your reading order, as you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, but don't follow that. The best way to put an IMRAD academic article together is really to follow the right order on the right-hand side. And that's because when you finish your results, you've got your results together, you've done your methods section, you are going to be writing probably those bits of the paper that you've finished first. So most often, researchers put together a paper starting in the methods or in the results, because those are the sections of the article that they have ready to go. And so we call this the right order rather than the IMRAD, the reading order. So don't fall into that trap as well. Why don't we write in the IMRAD order? Well, this is inefficient because your introduction may lack focus before you've analyzed your results. Starting with the methods and results helps to maintain objectivity before diving into interpretation. And I always find that, you've got your figures, you've got your results, talk about them and write the methods because that's just a sequence of events. We'll talk about that in a moment, but you might as well begin with the bits that you've got finished. That gives you the shape, the core, the central components of the rest of the article. Your discussion as well might be weak if it's written too early, as you might not yet have the context for interpreting your findings, which you develop as you put together your results section. So let's talk quickly about those different sections of the academic article, the methods. This section is like a narrative, a sequence of events, the steps that you took as you put your work together, what you did first, what you did second, what you did third, as you built your research project, your research theme, as you went through your experiment, let's say. So this is very important. And unfortunately, this is also the section of an academic paper that usually we encounter difficulties in peer review. And it's often the case that editors, peer reviewers will look very carefully at the method section of an academic article. So really you need to think, is this going to be successful? Have I got enough information in here for somebody else to be able to repeat my work? Which methods did you use to analyze your data? So do focus on your methods, be very structured. We do recommend that you begin with this section of the writing. Make a list beforehand. What did you do first? Collected your data before you went on and analyzed your data. That's, of course, the reason why in a method section, there's data collection coming before data analysis, your statistical analysis after your data collection, and why we talk about this in terms of a sequence of events, a timeline, first, second, third, and so on. So why don't we have a quick look with Scott about how we can write the method section using the Jenni.ai tool. I'll just stop sharing once again and hand over to my dear friend Scott for him to show you a few things about the method section.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. Okay, we're back to the tool now. And so we had our structure set up, and as Gareth instructed us, we better start with the methods first. And there's also a practical reason for doing this, is that, of course, your methods are the thing that you're developing first. So you can actually start drafting your manuscript with Jenni, even as the results are coming in, or you're still doing analysis on those. So I'm going to go here to the methods section, and I'm going to stick some of these in here. Forgive me, I was writing this in a separate browser using Jenni, so I'm just going to copy and paste them in so you don't have to watch me type. And here are my methods here. Again, very brief. If you are an actual dietitian or a sports medicine researcher, forgive my dummy text here. But as you can see, I've followed the structure that Gareth suggested, and I've just sort of copy and pasted the raw text into here. Now, what I can do with Jenni, much like with any other manuscript writer, but more powerfully, is I can now go back and I can do things like format the headings and give these a nice sense of formatting and division between the subsections. So here I've got, as Gareth suggested, the sections laid out in the order. We've got our study design first, again, very simply laid out. We mentioned the intervention that we're using, how we're testing that, and then we're using, we're talking about the kinds of stats analysis we're applying to the data here. So there would be a pretty brief but powerful methods section. Now, one function that you can use Jenni for here, just to show you some examples, is you can also adjust the style of writing that you're using. So if you click here and you'll see the window pops up and you can click AI commands here, and I can ask Jenni to improve my writing. So it might want to suggest some ways to improve the fluency. And then I can tell Jenni to either accept that, or I can just say, well, no, I think I prefer what I had before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to accept Jenni's suggestions here and keep those. What I can also do is I can change the style of writing. So depending on what type of paper you're writing, it might be, in this case, a traditional research paper. It might be an essay for a textbook, which is something else I'm also working on. And you can tell Jenni to change the style of writing. For example, you might simplify the writing so it sounds more concise, more academic, more casual, more persuasive, and so on. So these are some tools that you can also use Jenni to improve your writing with. So here I've got my methods section laid out, and that's a great place to start. And then I can start adding the results a bit later. But for now, I'm going to turn it back to Professor Dyke. Professor Dyke, what's
Yeah.
coming up next in our right order
Oh,
of
well,
writing our manuscript?
after the methods, we're going to be talking about the results. So let me just do that. Let me just put my screen back up so we can have a look at that section. What I like about this tool in particular, and you showed that very briefly there, Scott, is the ability to change the voice. So you might be writing in a particular style for a particular academic paper, but what if you want to make, like, let's say, what we call a plain language summary or a lay summary for a press release or for a website to talk about
Exactly.
your
Yeah.
research in an easy to understand way?
It's great for writing PLSs, plain language summaries, because it's very powerful at simplifying the text. And then, as you saw from that drop-down menu, I think you could see that on my screen. Not sure if the drop-downs were visible, but it actually gave me a range, 5 different types of simplification. So I can tell it to be concise and academic. It can be concise and persuasive, and so on. So I have a social sciences essay that I'm writing for a textbook, and I'm going to really make full use of that function to see if I can refine my speech to make it a bit more persuasive as I get to some of the argumentative parts of that essay. But for this research paper here, we're kind of sticking with Jenni's more academic style.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's really fantastic. We do encourage everyone to give it a go. Justin and Shane, there's been a few questions in the comments about accessing the tool, so maybe you can have a look at those. Is it free? Questions like that. We will pass those over to you so you can have a look at answering those in the chat for all of our participants. The results section, this is where you talk about what you found out in your study, but with no interpretation. So the facts and nothing but the facts. You describe your results. And this is often done based around figures. So you may generate some figures from your data and then describe those results in the text of your article. So a figure and text around that, often with the same sequence, the same structure, by the way, as the method section. But keep this limited to the facts. Your later sections, your discussion, you're going to do interpretation there. The primary and secondary outcomes in the same order often as the method section. And for that reason, lots of IMRAD STM articles have pretty much the same subheadings. Maybe you've seen this in your own research field in the methods and in the results. So tables and figures, very important, but figures, text. Result one, a figure and text. Figure and text is a great way to build out your results section. We don't want in the discussion, Scott will come back in a moment and talk about the discussion section, how to build that with the Jenni tool, but you may have seen those article shapes and the central section of a research article, the methods and results, very, very structured around what you actually did and what you actually found. But in your discussion, you have the chance to build this out a little bit and interpret more on those results. But we don't want an essay that goes all over the place in the discussion section. Focus it on your study and start your discussion with a single sentence. Very useful. You'll see this a lot in high impact factor papers, giving the answer, the main findings. The results of this study clearly demonstrate that. Start your discussion with a statement that gives the reader the answer to the question that they've come to read the paper to learn about, and discuss both your strengths and your weaknesses in the discussion. Lots of text on here, but it's a great slide to take a screenshot of, because in your discussion, you're going to be explaining what your results mean, why they differ from what other workers have found. You're going to interpret your results in light of other published information. Relate your discussion back to the objectives and questions that you raised at the beginning of the study, and make statements that synthesize that evidence, and limit your conclusions to what your data can actually support. And don't forget to suggest future directions for future research, for other areas that you may go into in the future, because you want other people to cite you if they read your paper. You don't want people to think, I've just had a fantastic idea, I'm going to go off and do it. You've got to write about that fantastic idea in your discussion. As you relate your study to what's already been found, discuss what your study means and put those unanswered questions in to the discussion. What could you not address? What could you not discover? And we don't want to see that old chestnut, that old cliche at the end of your paper. More research will be required to fully address this question. Don't finish your article with that. It's obvious. Of course, more research will be needed, as Scott's going to demonstrate now how you can put your results and discussion section together using the Jenni.ai tool.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. Let's go back to the tool here. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'll share again here. And so as Gareth mentioned, we've done methodology first, and I'm going to add some results to the manuscript here. So I'm going to close my document settings here. And as Gareth mentioned, of course, we want the results to appear in the same order that we mentioned them during the methods. So if I go back to my performance testing section here, this is where we tested the athletes on how the keto diet affected their running performance. We used these kinds of tests, and this was our stats analysis method here. So the results, I'm going to follow that same order and structure. So I'm just going to copy and paste these in for now. And what I've done is a kind of a structured results section. So I've got impacts on performance here. I've got physiological markers as well. We've got the question of fatigue, how tired runners felt when they were on the keto diet and trying to run marathons and so on. So as you can see, I've structured the results in the same order that the tests were conducted in the methods. So pretty simple there. And then we've got some results that we can talk about. We can now place these within a research context, as Gareth was saying. So here I'm going to add some discussion, and this is where Jenni, I think, can really help. I do have a draft set up here. I've added some questions and some context here. I've got a couple of citations in place. So what I might do is add another citation here. I've got 3 basic paragraphs to put my study in some context. I might ask Jenni to add a bit more to this and help me to find some other sources to help me explore more of the literature and perhaps add a bit more context. So it's pretty easy to do. It's probably the subject for an entire other event, but if you go to AI commands here, you can ask Jenni to continue writing, to add some more opposing arguments for discussion, and so on. So it's very powerful in this way. And one thing I would suggest ethically is because Jenni is so powerful at scouring the research and finding relevant papers for your study, again, as researchers, we have to do our homework. So if Jenni suggests a paper for you to cite in your paper, great, explore that paper, download it, read it, decide if it's relevant to your paper. And if you're going to cite that paper that Jenni suggests, read the paper and then put that in your library. Now you've got a bolder and wider context of sources with which to add to your paper. So again, Jenni is incredibly powerful at suggesting papers for you to read and explore. That's what I like most about it, I think. But again, as researchers, if Jenni suggests a paper, do the homework, read the paper. And if it's relevant, add that to your manuscript.
You must do that. Yeah, that's really, really important. You should never cite something that you've not actually read yourself, because that is unethical and also propagates potentially problematic content into the literature in the future. So do keep that in mind, everybody. That's a great point, Scott. Thanks for that.
Okay, now in some manuscripts, you might have a conclusion section. Strengths and limitations is an important one for a study like this. So I could add a strengths and limitation section. And this is a great place where Jenni could suggest other studies to challenge my findings, to give us more to discuss, and maybe to suggest future research. So I'm going to add a subsection here on strengths and limitations. And I'm also going to add a conclusion section. So this manuscript here has a combined discussion and conclusion. I checked some other papers that were being submitted and accepted at that journal. Most of those papers were following this kind of a structure where they had folded in the conclusion to the discussion section. So now, as Gareth was saying earlier, a clear takeaway message. So let's look at my conclusion here. I'm going to take my conclusion and copy paste the whole thing in here. There it is, boom. That final sentence, these findings suggest blah. Great way to finish your paper with a clear message. But I've also got suggestions for future research. So if I go back to my strengths and limitations, I might stick in a sentence here that explains what I think are the weaknesses of the study and then what future researchers could focus on. So in the case of this paper, maybe it's using ketogenic diet in a periodic way instead of putting them on a sustained keto diet. These marathon runners, maybe they can do interval diets using keto. That's something that future researchers might want to explore. So I've put that here in my future suggested research. And then a quick conclusion, takeaway points, and that's the end of my conclusion section.
Fantastic. We're getting there. As we mentioned earlier, like this is a process that would previously have taken a huge amount of time, and we're able to do it in a much shorter time with the Jenni.ai tool. I'll continue to talk about the introduction, abstract, title, and methods. I think that's where we need to go next. We're going to talk a little bit now about the introduction, how to put your introduction together. And of course, this has, again, a clear template structure, but you want to grab the reader. You want to keep your introduction short, 2 or 3 paragraphs if possible, and you really want to avoid a literature review in your introduction. Average length of an academic paper, about 6,000 words. So you've only got about 1,500 for a fantastic introduction, with an opening sentence that takes you straight to the issue, a summary of the controversies and the best evidence, keeping within the rules of good writing, the most important details related to the issue, and the end of your introduction should have a crisp research question. What is the reason that you did the study? Section 3, in this study, we seek to address, or we answer to end the introduction and bridge over into the methods. Generally speaking, a well-written introduction consists of 3 sections. You state the question at the beginning in the first section. What are you going to be working on? Then you give a generalized overview of what's currently known about that particular subject area in the middle section, and then finish by saying, this study shows. You bridge into your method section. And we're working through the different components of the paper following the right order. So if you're listening back to this later on YouTube, you'll be able to skip back to the earlier slides and see why it's important to put the paper together in this particular order. Right, Scott?
Absolutely. And as Gareth mentioned, the introduction is coming last if we're following this MRDI or MDRI order, and it depends on what type of paper you're writing, which one you choose. But so now we've got the other sections, at least the frameworks of them put together. So that leaves just the introduction section here. So as you can see, I've got my methods, got my results, discussion, conclusion, and that just leaves the introduction. So this is quite different from what you would intuitively do. You might start with the introduction and maybe the abstract or the title even, and write down from there. But in this case, no, we're doing this in this very logical order because it follows the flow of the way you actually do your research. So I'm going to add some introduction stuff here. Now, in a future event, we'll show you how you can grow your introduction section, add more context by citing more papers, by exploring and reading and discovering more based on Jenni's citation searches. So perhaps in a future event. But for now, we've got our introduction section in place, and now we've got the basic parts of an INRAD manuscript.
Absolutely fantastic. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're almost at the end. We're just coming through the last sections of the academic article now. I'll just jump back over into my screen share, go full screen on that. We've talked about the introduction. Let's finally then talk about your abstract and your title, those key elements of the article that are going to be selling the work to the editors and peer reviewers, potentially all that they're going to read at the outset when they make a decision whether to send the paper out for peer review or not. Is it interesting enough for their journal? A good quality abstract, round about 200 words, honest and precise. It's got to be able to stand alone. Sometimes that's all that people read. It's used in search engines to find your work. No technical jargon, short and specific, and no references in this particular component, usually almost always of an STM article abstract. Don't forget that many journals base their decision on the abstract alone, whether or not to send the paper out for peer review. Sadly, many authors, me included, back in the day, write this at the end in a big rush, but that's a big mistake. It should be a standalone piece of writing with a very clear message. Remember, before you start to write, you need to know your message, your audience, that's your journal, and the structure of the writing. So this has to reflect the full text of the paper. You can write it using the Jenni.ai tool, answering these 4 questions. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Those questions, answering those questions, putting text from those questions into the abstract. You'll end up with words you can edit. Several different examples we have of this, but you've got a background abstract here, an abstract that gives you methodology and principal findings, and an abstract that gives you conclusions and significance. These go together, answering those 4 different questions, giving your abstract the structure that it needs to be understandable to everybody. So if your journal is not asking for a structured abstract, you can write one anyway by using our 4 questions, you can just delete the questions. It'll be a fantastic way of putting the structure together for your next paper. And from my own work, I know that this works. I did it manually many times in the past. I don't have to do it manually anymore. I can use the Jenni.ai tool to quickly and easily put together a fantastic, readable, interesting, alluring, and informative article abstract. And finally, then, of course, you need a great title. Something that gets people's attention, something that attracts, allures, entices, gets editors, peer reviewers, and readers thinking, I really, really, really want to read this paper to find out the answer to the question. A good title has the shortest number of words, the fewest possible words to adequately describe the contents of the paper. You want the main issue, the subject, be accurate, unambiguous, specific, and complete. No weird, infrequently used abbreviations. And above all, attract people's attention. Get people thinking, I really want to read this paper to learn more. Concise and informative, most important words related to the topic, enticing people without giving away the punchline, of course. You want what's called a non-declarative title, new drug and its effect on cancer, rather than a declarative title. My new drug is the cure for cancer. That keeps people interested, gets them wanting to read, not over sensational. And you may need, depending on your journal, some information on study design. So that's the abstract, that's the title. Scott's going to show you how to do it with the Jenni tool.
Okay, thank you, Professor. And we're going to get to the Jenni team in just a moment for some Q&A to finish up our event today. So really quickly, I'll just show you how I created the abstract for this paper. Now, again, I'm old school. I actually did write this abstract initially manually, but I was curious to see what Jenni would come up with some prompting. So let's open up our prompt window here. I'm going to open the AI chat window, and you can see the prompt that I put in here. Very basic prompt, generate an unstructured abstract. So Gareth mentioned some structured types, but I noticed that my target journal prefers an unstructured abstract. That means an abstract with no headings. I put in a simple prompt and Jenni came up with a pretty strong abstract. I think this is probably just as good or better than the abstract that I sweated over and wrote manually myself. I might take some of these references out, but otherwise this is a great abstract. And so I have added this to my document where I can then refine it further. So again, Jenni is incredibly strong at suggesting text to insert to your paper. But again, let's be good researchers, do the homework and take it to the final stage ourselves. So I think after I copy and paste this in, I'm going to go through and edit this abstract to my liking, or maybe revisit the journal guidelines again and just make sure that I'm within word counts, that I'm on point, and so on. There's much more that Jenni can do here, but that's maybe a topic for a future event. But we've got a fairly complete paper in place here. And I also asked the chat to suggest some titles. Professor, can you see my titles here? Any of these jump out at you? Which
I
ones do
can.
you like?
Well, I'm blown away by the fact that this just within a 45-minute webinar, we've put a paper together. That's amazing, isn't it? And the titles look great. I mean, well, there's one with a colon. That's a trick that's often used to keep people's attention. So
Yeah,
something
I
specific.
love colon titles. Yeah,
Absolutely. I don't know.
yeah,
I
I
wouldn't
love
go for
colons.
the carbohydrate availability one. That's a bit long. Looks a bit complicated to me. But the other three look good. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting. And as we found in our conclusions on this fake paper, again, apologies to all of you sports scientists out there. I'm a complete imposter here. But as we know from this paper, their conclusions were that the ketogenic diet did impact performance, although people lost fat. So interesting, kind of conflicting results there. And again, if you do get negative results in your paper, make sure you publish those anyway. Be ethical. So there we've got a more or less complete paper. And maybe this is a great time to close my window here and turn it over to your questions. I'm sure you have questions either about the writing process for Professor Dyke here, or you have questions about the Jenni tool for our members of the Jenni team here. So yeah, I think we've got some great questions in the chat. And yeah, over to the Jenni team. Shane and Justin, any interesting questions that popped out from our guests today?
Yeah, tons of questions. I'm still trying to answer all of them in the chat. I'm trying to speed type as much as possible. But yeah, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer. I'm just like I was just mentioning that for a few of our participants that are just leaving early because they have maybe a meeting, that we'll be sending a session recording at the end as well to review the presentation that you guys made today.
Absolutely. That'll go out 24 hours after the event ends. So just check your inbox, everyone. As Justin said, we'll send you a link to the full recording. We normally don't send out the slides themselves, but even better than that, we'll send you the full recording with a transcript so that you can scan through and find the information that you might have missed. Yeah, thanks, Justin.
Yeah,
One
and
question that
just
came up. Oh, sorry,
oh
Justin. Go
yeah,
ahead,
go.
please.
Oh yeah, I
Go
just
ahead.
said one question. A few questions are just popping up now in terms of privacy issues regarding sharing my content. So Jenny doesn't share any of your content, so it's private directly to your account. So we don't use it to train any of our models or anything like that. So yeah, that's the first question in terms of generating new text. When you're generating new text using our Edit with AI features. You can ask Jenny to, let's say, paraphrase, or you can ask it to improve the fluency, maybe change the tone to a argumentative or persuasive tone. Jenny will give you the suggestion highlighted, and before it adds it to your paper, you can either click accept or you can try again. So you'll be able to see the change before it's just instantly added to your paper. Uh,
That's a great point, Justin. And I wanted to mention that as well because a couple of our guests asked about concerns about plagiarism. What I do like about Jenny Tool is that as powerful as it is for paraphrasing, it is a citation tool. So it's a citation manager as well as a literature review assistant. And I think for people who have concerns about some of these powerful tools for research, I think the whole point of it is that Jenny is citing an actual study that then you read and then you put into your paper. It will help you to paraphrase it so that you avoid some of the common plagiarism issues. So it is a citation management tool for those who are concerned about issues of paraphrasing plagiarism or AI generated plagiarism. It's not going to generate fake sources for your paper. Is that right, Justin?
Yes, yes, of course. So I guess there's two ways to have to integrate sources within Jenny. One, we have a database of over 250 million research articles that's available to anybody on the platform. But then, of course, you can also upload your own sources into the Jenny library, which is essentially, like Scott was saying, a citation manager or a reference manager directly into the Jenny workspace. So we really like to say that Jenny is a combination of like ChatGPT, Microsoft Word, and Zotero all consolidated into one research tool.
That's kind of my impression as well, actually. That's a great way of putting it. And I'm still a noob with Jenny. As you can see, I'm still kind of stumbling around the interface. But even for me, someone who hasn't really had much experience using it, you saw how easy it was for me to put a cohesive manuscript together. So I think it speaks to the intuitive interface. Right. Any other burning questions that came up for the Jenny team, for Shane and Justin? Anything you'd like to focus on from our many questions in the chat?
I guess the last question that just come up is PDFs uploading. You can upload more than 10 PDFs. It's just 10 PDFs at a time that you can actually upload. So yeah, you can at this point we actually have no limit on how many PDFs you can upload. We've spent a lot of time to optimize storage for users at this point. But just at 10 at a time, and then I'll upload, and then you can upload another 10. Or you can upload, let's say, bib text files or .bib directly from your Zotero or Mendeley library, for example, to upload thousands or hundreds of sources at a time. Or you can just simply copy and paste a DOI archive or a PubMed URL directly into the Jenny inbox, I guess, search bar, and then it'll look for you.
One question that I've seen in the chat that's really interesting is about whether or not this tool is available free. I know you've addressed that in the chat, but maybe you can say a few things about that. And also some questions from one colleague in Nigeria about whether there's a version for colleagues in kind of I don't know, less economically developed areas of the world potentially?
Yes, of course. I mean, I guess just to start off with our free plan, we do have a free plan. It allows you to have access to all of the features of Jenni, but we do just have some daily limits due to the cost of using AI and the processing power. But we do try to give as much daily limits as possible. I believe it's like 200 words that you can generate per day completely for free, and it will refresh. Um, and we have a paid subscription as well that is optimized for certain regions. We do have PPP discounted pricing for regions like Nigeria, Southeast Asia, things like that. I believe it's even like 50% of the price of an original subscription. So it's just automatically based on the region you're at. Jenni automatically applies that discount. So yeah.
That's great to know, Justin. Here at SciTrain, we believe very strongly in leveling the playing field for researchers around the world. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to mention in terms of, yeah, we just really wanted to thank everybody for attending the webinar. So we, as a token of our appreciation, we wanted to give you guys a free month on Jenni on us. So you guys can just use the code free month um, during checkout, and then it'll activate your free month completely on us.
That's great.
So yeah, we can send maybe a follow-up email afterwards with the with the discount code as well for all the participants watching.
Great to know. We'll stick that in the follow-up email that's going out tomorrow. So when we send out the link to the video recording, we'll share with you Justin's free month code just in case you missed it. Thanks very much, Justin. Great. Here's a question, I think, for both the Jenni team and for Gareth, perhaps. One of our guests asks, does Jenni help in finding a good journal to publish our research paper? So we mentioned the importance of journal selection. I didn't see a journal selection function yet in Jenni. There are some tools out there, though. Anyone speak to this?
Yes, I mean, to be honest, we don't have a journal selection tool at the moment. We are talking to a few journals and actually journals to do potential partnerships with them as well. So that could be really interesting in the future. We've actually also been considering creating our own journal as well to start publishing papers because we found that, um, I guess we have so many people writing research articles and various manuscripts on Jenni, and they're just looking for additional ways to add additional visibility to their papers. So we're trying to create a more open access community for articles.
Well, thanks so much to the Jenni team for joining us today. And as always, thanks to Professor Dyke. Gareth, your insights are always helpful as usual. I've stolen lots of great tips and ideas from you today for my next paper. And again, thanks to everyone for joining us and taking time out of your busy day. Any final thoughts from Gareth or the Jenni team? Gareth, you first. Any final thoughts for our guests today?
That was great. And as I said several times, it's great to do these events together with you, Scott. We always have a lot of fun, but I'm blown away by how quickly we could put together an article in this less than 1 hour webinar today. So that's my main takeaway. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I guess first off, thanks for hosting, Gareth and Scott. This webinar has been really amazing with a lot of great tips, and I definitely learned a lot too. I enjoyed that Arnold picture during the presentation. So yeah, and then also thank you everyone for joining. I hope you learned something and have a chance to try out Jenni, especially with our free month discount.
Thanks so much, Justin and Shane and Gareth, and thanks to everyone for joining. And yeah, check your inbox tomorrow. We'll send you some goodies. And thanks so much to everyone for joining today. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
All right. Thanks, guys.